Rachel Zegler then inexplicably continued to post herself in an empty theater for her own movie. She's literally the only person there. Meanwhile, the experience at Minecraft.
Rachel Zegler was supposed to shine in Disney's live-action Snow White. This was meant to be her crowning moment, the role that fused her rising star with one of Disney's most iconic fairy tales. But instead of a fairy tale ending, the project quickly spiraled into controversy. From the moment early leaks hinted at drastic changes to the original story, fans were on edge. And when whispers emerged of Jack Black allegedly confronting Zegler over the film's chaotic production and her unwavering defense of the remake, everything exploded. That rumored clash, one that insiders claim pushed Zegler to an emotional breaking point, highlighted just how volatile the entire situation had become.
Goes something like this.
Chicken joe.
What began as a bold attempt to reinvent a classic has now unraveled into a cautionary tale. Behind the scenes, creative decisions were questioned. Test screenings reportedly left executives scrambling, and die-hard Disney fans, normally eager for anything branded with the studio's magic, started voicing real concern. Complaints ranged from the story's tone feeling heavy-handed to the pacing being completely off. The backlash grew with each new reveal, and what might have once been dismissed as internet noise turned into a full-blown storm. Eventually, even Bob Iger had to step in, alongside Zegler herself, to do damage control, insisting the film was simply misunderstood. But by then, many were already asking, has Disney finally pushed too far?
Snow White, the toe-curlingly terrible live-action remake, has bombed so hard at the box office that even Paul Tassi had to admit it. It got $43 million, and there are very few ways to spin that.
No matter how hard Disney tried to steer the narrative, the Snow White controversy became impossible to contain. Whispers from inside the production painted a picture of chaos, reshoots, frantic rewrites, and last-minute edits that reportedly shredded the film's original tone. Test audiences described it as a movie with a solid, even hopeful opening that quickly collapsed into confusion. Entire scenes were allegedly cut, shuffled, or replaced so late in the game that the final product felt like a patchwork. Continuity errors, strange tonal shifts, and a heavy-handed message left viewers wondering what happened to the charm and simplicity of Disney's original fairy tale. And then, in the middle of all that noise, a bombshell rumor dropped. Jack Black had allegedly confronted Rachel Zegler behind closed doors. Known for his larger-than-life personality and thoughtful takes on fandom culture, Black supposedly pulled no punches. According to insider chatter, he questioned Zegler's public attitude, specifically her habit of brushing off criticism and labeling fans as toxic or ignorant. He reportedly urged her to consider whether that dismissive approach was helping anyone, especially the film. What happened next? Depends on who you ask. Some say Zegler lashed out in frustration. Others claim she broke down, overwhelmed by the pressure, the backlash, and the growing sense that the movie was slipping through her fingers. Witnesses allegedly described the moment as a complete meltdown.
Just last week, the media and the shill influencers were trying to do everything they could to save Snow White from being a complete and total flop in the box office, and they failed miserably. This movie is already a complete and total disaster, and it is so bad that now even the media has to admit.
A breaking point that had been building for weeks. Between the endless reshoots, the non-stop online hate, and the burden of being the public face of a film on the verge of implosion, Zegler may have simply reached her limit. Whether Jack Black meant to call her out or offer tough love, one thing's clear. That confrontation became yet another turning point in an already volatile story. As whispers of the Jack Black-Rachel Zegler confrontation gained momentum, the internet did what it does best, took the rumor and ran with it. For many, it wasn't just gossip, it was confirmation. A sign that something was deeply broken behind the scenes of Snow White. This wasn't just a case of artistic disagreements or creative misfires. It felt personal. Fans and critics alike began speculating that the same tension they sensed in the promotional material, the trailers, even in Zegler's interviews, had bled directly into the production. That the stress wasn't just off-camera, it was part of the DNA of the film itself. Officially, neither Disney nor Zegler acknowledged the alleged blow-up with Jack Black, but their silence only fueled the fire. In the absence of a denial, imaginations filled the void. People who had already decided the remake was a disaster latched onto the story like gasoline on a flame. Online forums, YouTube breakdowns, and fan pages dissected every detail, crafting a narrative of a chaotic set.
Minecraft in the United States in one weekend made more money than Snow White has made globally after 3 weekends.
Disjointed leadership, and a leading actress under crushing pressure. But not everyone bought into the storm. A smaller chorus of voices urged skepticism, reminding the internet that massive productions are always high stress, that emotional moments don't necessarily signal doom, and that hearsay can spiral wildly out of control. Still, the damage had already been done. The moment the Jack Black rumor entered the discourse, it cracked open a larger, more uncomfortable question. How did Snow White, one of the most beloved fairy tales of all time, become ground zero for controversy, backlash, and behind-the-scenes drama? Zegler, for her part, stayed the course. She continued to champion the film's message and vision publicly, insisting that it was a new take worth telling. But critics were unrelenting. They pointed to deeper issues: screenplay problems, jarring scene transitions, tonal inconsistency, and pacing that never gave the story room to breathe. Even the star power attached, Jack Black included, whether in a rumored role or just tangentially, wasn't enough to distract from what many saw as a remake trying too hard to say something, and not nearly hard enough to simply be something magical. In the end, the question wasn't just about whether the film was good or bad. It was whether Disney's once reliable fairy tale formula had finally cracked under the weight of its own reinvention. In the final stretch before Snow White's wide release, Disney pulled out all the stops to steady the ship. Bob Iger himself joined Rachel Zegler in a last-minute PR push, projecting confidence and reminding fans that Disney has always reimagined its classics to resonate with new generations, without losing the essence that made them timeless.
I love what you said about wanting to entertain audiences, critics saying Disney's too woke, but you're just putting out storytelling.
We are. Look, I don't really like the term woke because I think it's an umbrella term that I'm not 100% sure I even know what it means.
But this time, the message didn't land. For the first time in years, Disney loyalists, the ones who usually flood social media with hype and heart emojis, started sounding the alarm. Their concerns weren't minor. They weren't just upset over costumes or casting. They were calling out a deeper, more unsettling issue. This remake felt fundamentally disconnected from the magic of the original. What once was a simple, whimsical fairy tale had, in their eyes, become a confusing mashup of modern messaging and inconsistent tone. The story wasn't evolving, it was unraveling, and many fans believed the soul of Snow White had been lost somewhere between boardroom decisions and last-minute edits. Then came the Jack Black rumors, and everything escalated. If someone as beloved and savvy as Jack Black, a Hollywood veteran known for balancing satire with sincerity, had concerns about the production, people paid attention. The idea that he may have directly confronted Zegler, whether out of frustration, concern, or tough love, gave weight to the whispers that things behind the scenes were far from okay. For critics of the film, this rumor was like fuel to a fire they'd already started. They framed it as proof of internal chaos, a project so fraught with conflict and indecision that even its cast couldn't keep quiet. But on the flip side, Zegler's supporters pushed back hard. If she did reach a breaking point, they argued, who could blame her? She was a young actress shouldering the weight of a billion-dollar brand, dealing with relentless online hate, and trying to defend a film she still believed in. And let's be honest, when things go south, it's almost always the female lead who ends up in the crosshairs. What started as a high-stakes remake was now something else entirely, a cultural flashpoint, a cautionary tale, and maybe even a career-defining moment for everyone involved.
This thing was a disaster. It only made $43 million at the box office, which is really bad for a movie like this. I don't have the numbers at the top of my head, but I want to tell you, Cinderella, which was a number of years ago, don't forget how much inflation has happened.
As the rumor mill kicked into overdrive, the story around Jack Black's alleged confrontation with Rachel Zegler took on a life of its own. No one could quite agree on how it happened, only that it did. Some claimed it was a private exchange on set, overheard by a crew member who later leaked the details. Others whispered that it went down during a press event, off camera, but close enough for bystanders to catch raised voices and a visibly shaken Zegler. A few even suggested it wasn't in person at all, but a heated phone call or a blunt string of texts that spiraled out of context. Each version was different, but they all painted the same picture. Zegler, emotional and overwhelmed, pulling back from the spotlight in the days that followed, seemingly to regroup. And in that silence, the speculation only grew louder. If the rumors were false, why not issue a sharp public denial? Why let it simmer? But if there was some truth to it, some moment of friction, then maybe it was just the tip of the iceberg. Maybe the pressure cooker behind the scenes was far more intense than anyone realized. For fans already skeptical of the project, this wasn't just juicy gossip. It was further evidence that the production had been a creative mess all along. Meanwhile, critics kept circling back to those test screening reports. Over and over, early viewers described the same pattern, a charming, nostalgic beginning that quickly derailed into a series of jarring tonal shifts and disconnected scenes. What was supposed to be a modern fairy tale started feeling more like a lecture, one that never quite knew who it was talking to. If a comedic thread existed, maybe even a cameo by Jack Black, it didn't blend, it clashed. Badly. Many believed the heart of the story got buried under messaging that felt less like storytelling and more like box-checking. The film wasn't just struggling to balance whimsy and relevance, it was tearing at the seams trying to do both. And in that struggle, the soul of Snow White may have been lost. Even Jack Black's signature charisma couldn't paper over what felt, to some, like a script at war with itself. A fairy tale trying so hard to be current that it forgot how to be timeless. At the center of the storm, Rachel Zegler's public responses to criticism only added fuel to the fire. While she never directly called anyone out, she repeatedly hinted that much of the backlash was rooted in bad faith.
You know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah. Weird.
For some, that read as tone-deaf, especially to fans who had supported Disney's live-action ventures in the past, but were now voicing genuine concerns. Her comments were seen by many as dismissive, reinforcing the growing sentiment that Disney wasn't just ignoring constructive criticism, it was actively alienating the very audiences that built its legacy. This wasn't the first time. In recent years, Disney has faced similar heat over labeling dissenting opinions as trolling or toxicity, blurring the line between actual hate and valid disapproval. And now, even longtime fans of hits like The Jungle Book, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin were starting to reconsider their loyalty. The conversation shifted from defending a creative risk to questioning whether Disney even understood its audience anymore. Then came more insider reports, and they weren't pretty. Reshoots had allegedly wreaked havoc on the narrative. Key scenes that gave the story emotional weight were chopped, shuffled, or restructured so severely that characters and plotlines never had a chance to breathe. According to fans lucky, or unlucky, enough to attend early screenings, the film was a tonal roller coaster, careening between solemn fairy tale gravitas and awkward comedic beats. There was no rhythm, no cohesion, just a swirling mess of mixed messaging. Some speculated that the film's core identity had been lost entirely, as the studio struggled to juggle progressive themes with nostalgic expectations. The result? A movie that satisfied no one. And if the rumors about Jack Black stepping in to confront Zegler were true, some believed it wasn't just about fan backlash, it was about frustration from within. Frustration that what could have been a whimsical musical showcase was being drowned out by clashing visions, relentless PR disasters, and a story that couldn't decide what it wanted to be. In short, Snow White wasn't just fighting public perception, it was battling an identity crisis of its own making. One of the biggest red flags didn't come from critics or trolls. It came from the fans.
It does seem like the media have got the throw her under the bus green light, though, when we're posting things like this. We're slagging her off behind the scenes, we're dropping all the information, and then reminding you of, her attacking the majority of the population of America when she posted F the Orange Man.
The very people who had championed Disney's past live-action remakes, The Jungle Book, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, were now publicly turning their backs on Snow White. These weren't casual viewers. They were the ride-or-die Disney loyalists, the ones who gave every remake the benefit of the doubt. So when they started speaking out, it sent a powerful message. This wasn't about nitpicking. This was about trust, lost. And that shift was impossible to ignore. Observers quickly realized the backlash wasn't just a vocal minority blowing things out of proportion. It looked more like a tipping point, a warning sign that Disney's audience was reevaluating everything. The once reliable formula of updating beloved classics suddenly wasn't a guaranteed win. And if the rumored behind-the-scenes clash between Rachel Zegler and Jack Black did happen, it became more than gossip. it became a symbol of the creative breakdown happening within the film itself. As fans and industry insiders dissected what went wrong, one theory came up again and again. Snow White had drifted too far from what made the original special. Updating a story isn't the problem. It's how you do it. And here, critics argued, the film didn't evolve the fairy tale. It replaced it. The original charm, the innocence, the magic, all allegedly sacrificed in favor of a message that felt more like a lecture than a story. Even supporters of modern reimaginings were forced to admit, there's a fine line between relevance and alienation. Yes, every generation deserves their version of a classic, but when that version stops feeling like a story and starts sounding like a statement, you risk losing the very people you were trying to reach. And that, some say, is exactly what happened here. Adding to the storm of creative confusion, public comments from the production team didn't help. In fact, they made things worse. Rather than addressing the growing chorus of criticism with transparency, some statements painted critics as simply negative or unable to appreciate the artistic vision. That tone didn't just miss the mark, it backfired. Fans who had grown up with Disney, who genuinely wanted to love this film, were now being told that their concerns didn't matter unless they fell in line.
Snow White reviews are in. Snow White, how shall we say? Data points are in, because we now know that it was a flop.
Suddenly, the narrative became, only true supporters understand the message. To many, that felt like a slap in the face. And that's where the rumored Jack Black confrontation gained even more weight. This wasn't just a celebrity feud, it was symbolic. Jack Black is one of those rare figures who bridges both worlds, the mainstream audience and the creative elite. If he felt the need to step in and question the direction or defend the fan base, it was seen by many as validation that something deeper had gone off the rails. Whether or not the alleged meltdown happened exactly as described, the story fit too perfectly into the larger narrative. A production under pressure, a cast divided, and a creative vision buckling under its own contradictions. Then came whispers about Greta Gerwig. The acclaimed filmmaker's involvement, though somewhat behind the scenes, added yet another twist. As speculation swirled, many wondered, would Gerwig break her silence? Would she step in to explain the creative choices? Maybe defend the script? Or distance herself entirely? Any comment from her could tilt the conversation dramatically, but industry insiders warned, even the most carefully crafted statement could easily be dismissed as damage control. Once the audience senses they've been sold something they didn't ask for, something that strays too far from what was promised, no amount of polished post-release commentary can fix that. Because when the core of a story feels broken, all the clarifications in the world won't bring back the magic. Industry insiders are starting to sound the alarm. For years, Disney's live-action remakes were guaranteed box office hits, crowd pleasers built on nostalgia and spectacle. But now, the cracks are showing. With each new release, the returns are getting smaller and the criticism louder. And with Snow White, the situation feels different. This isn't just another misstep. It's starting to look like a full-on reckoning. Some are calling it the tipping point, a moment where Disney is forced to confront the hard truth.
You ever wonder what happens when you mix hot lava and chicken?
The formula that once felt invincible might finally be running out of steam. And that now infamous Jack Black-Rachel Zegler meltdown rumor? For many, it's more than behind-the-scenes drama. It's a metaphor, a symbol of a much bigger breakdown within Disney's entire approach to reimagining its classics. If Snow White flops at the box office, it won't just sting, it'll confirm what audiences have been whispering for months. You can't sell magic if you've forgotten how to make it. All of this has sparked a larger conversation about Disney's over-reliance on its Golden Age animation vault. Repackaging beloved stories with shiny effects and modern themes used to be enough. But not anymore. Audiences have evolved, and they're not afraid to speak up. Online, fans are making it clear. Nostalgia isn't a blank check. If the soul of the story gets lost, if the essence of what made these tales iconic is replaced with awkward messaging or clunky narratives, then no amount of branding can cover it up. Viewers don't want carbon copies, and they don't want lectures disguised as fairy tales. They want thoughtful updates, reinventions that honor the heart of the original while offering something genuinely new. That's a high bar, and Disney isn't clearing it, at least not with Snow White. And if they can't rediscover that balance soon, the entire live-action remake model might be headed for a serious identity crisis. In a broader sense, Snow White's unraveling says more than just, one film went wrong. It captures a cultural shift, where nostalgia alone no longer guarantees success, and where audiences demand more than just a recycled story with a modern gloss. The rumored Jack Black-Rachel Zegler meltdown, whether fact or fiction, has become the perfect metaphor for this shift.
I think it's fair to say that no one on the right side of America can stand the star of this movie. And yet, Christian, you've seen the movie, and it appears that the filmmakers cobbled together enough salvageable material to make the movie itself quite nice.
It reflects the tension between legacy and reinvention, between old-school charm and today's hypersensitive, hyper-connected media world. In this era, it only takes a spark, one offhand comment, one viral rumor, for dissent to spiral into full-blown drama. And when you're remaking something as sacred as Snow White, audiences expect more than clever twists or forced themes. They expect reverence, authenticity, a clear love for the original spirit. If instead they sense cynicism, a cash grab, a clumsy rebrand, the backlash is swift and unforgiving. To make matters worse, modern media thrives on these flashpoints. A dramatic clash between a beloved comedic icon and a rising young star? That's headline gold. It's the perfect cocktail of personal tension, professional conflict, and pop culture chaos, all wrapped around a film already teetering under public scrutiny. Suddenly, the rumored meltdown isn't just drama, it's symbolism. It becomes the narrative everyone rallies around, a shorthand for a production that, like its story, lost the plot. For those still rooting for Disney's comeback, the real question is, what now? Will the company take this moment seriously? Will they recognize the need for genuine course correction? Or will they do what studios so often do, blame toxic fandoms, double down on messaging, and chalk it all up to bad marketing? Because if Disney chooses the latter, the next remake might not just flop, it might implode. And the next meltdown, on set or online, might be far harder to recover from. Those who continue to circulate the meltdown story claim it happened at the worst possible time, when emotions were already stretched thin. Rachel Zegler was, by all accounts, under immense pressure. She was facing wave after wave of online attacks, criticisms targeting everything from her performance to her polarizing public comments. And in the middle of that storm, Jack Black allegedly stepped in, but not to escalate. According to this version of events, he stepped in out of concern, worried that framing all criticism as trolling or bad faith hate was only deepening the divide between the film and its audience.
Like, it was a really, really, really bad flop. Now, things I do for you guys. I went to Snow White over the weekend. I took my kids. I'll tell you, I'm not sure who was more bored.
His intention may have been to offer perspective, a moment of tough love. But the irony? That intervention, meant as a wake-up call, became the story itself, overshadowing any creative advice or moral high ground it might have carried. As the rumor goes, Zegler felt ambushed, hurt by someone she looked up to. That emotional collapse, whether exaggerated or not, became the defining moment that exposed just how precarious the entire situation had become, not just for her, but for the film, the cast, and Disney's entire strategy moving forward. If the meltdown happened, and even if it didn't, the message it sends is clear. Behind the carefully scripted interviews and curated promotional reels, there may have been panic. And now, in the aftermath, the real work begins. Internally, executives are likely reassessing everything, from PR damage control to how far a legacy can be pushed before it snaps. On the surface, the team might still describe Snow White as a bold reinterpretation, one that champions diversity and speaks to modern values. But privately, the meltdown is a warning. Push too far, too fast, without anchoring change in the heart of what made a story timeless. And the whole thing can collapse. The moment becomes more than rumor. It becomes a symbol, a cautionary tale of creative ambition colliding with cultural disconnect. And for Disney, it raises the most important question of all. Can you rewrite a fairy tale without breaking it? Still, not everyone is convinced the meltdown ever happened. A portion of Disney's loyal fan base has pushed back, arguing that the story is just another example of critics rooting for failure. They see a familiar cycle, one where early skepticism snowballs into outrage, and before the film even hits theaters, the narrative is already poisoned. In their eyes, the so-called Jack Black-Rachel Zegler confrontation is just another piece of tabloid-style gossip, designed to fuel negativity and drive clicks. And until someone directly involved confirms the story, They say, it deserves to be treated with skepticism. But even that cautious perspective doesn't erase the bigger picture. Because whether a meltdown occurred or not, the complaints about Snow White's final product are hard to ignore.
So did you go directly from West Side? Like, did you have to audition for Snow White, or like, oh, they saw you in West Side Story, they're like, you're Snow White?
West Side Story was kind of nowhere near coming out. We were about like 6 months away from release, and no footage had been seen.
Test audience reactions painted a clear picture. The film lacked cohesion. Pacing issues, abrupt tonal shifts, and a patchwork narrative made it feel like a movie assembled on the fly, rather than crafted with care. Insiders later admitted there were multiple rewrites late in the process, each one intended to fix structural problems, but none of them fully succeeding. Instead of streamlining the story, the rewrites only created more inconsistencies. The final result? A film that feels unsure of what it wants to be, pulled in too many directions, and weighed down by a moral message that rarely blends with the flow of the story. And that's exactly why the meltdown rumor resonates. Even if it's fictional, it feels true. In many ways, the alleged confrontation with Jack Black has become symbolic. Whether or not it actually happened doesn't matter as much anymore. It represents something real. The idea that even those inside the production could sense things weren't going right, that emotions were boiling, and trust in the creative vision was unraveling. The meltdown fits too perfectly into the broader narrative, a film plagued by indecision, marred by clashing perspectives, and ultimately undone by its inability to honor the very story it set out to reimagine. So even if the tale is pure fabrication, it endures because it fits. It mirrors the confusion, the chaos, and the emotional weight of a production that was never quite on solid ground. A fairy tale meant to recapture Disney's legacy, instead becoming a cautionary tale of how quickly that legacy can slip away. Looking ahead, all eyes are on the film's opening weekend. That box office debut, and the wave of word of mouth that follows, will determine whether Snow White sinks under the weight of its controversy or somehow beats the odds. If general audiences embrace it, if the story resonates in spite of the noise, the meltdown rumors and early backlash could fade into the background, just another chapter in Hollywood's endless cycle of pre-release panic. But most industry insiders aren't holding their breath. Early projections are lukewarm at best. Analysts suggest that while curiosity surrounding the controversy may give the movie a temporary boost, long-term success depends on the one thing Disney used to deliver effortlessly: quality. If the film really does suffer from pacing issues, narrative confusion, and a tone that leans too heavily into moralizing, then even the most generous audiences may walk away disappointed. And once word spreads that the magic isn't there, no amount of nostalgic branding or PR spin will bring it back. And so, the tension hangs in the air.
Crying on that stage.
When am I not crying in public? It's so upsetting.
Why were you crying?
Oh my gosh, I saw the well, we didn't even see. But I saw the logo and I went, that's my name. Snow White's up there.
Rachel Zegler, Jack Black, and the entire creative team now find themselves at the center of a cultural flashpoint, one that has grown far beyond the scope of a typical film release. The so-called meltdown, whether it was a real emotional breaking point or a symbolic eruption of creative frustration, has taken on a life of its own. It represents something bigger, the feeling that Disney's once reliable fairy tale formula might finally be unraveling. Maybe an official statement will come, maybe it won't. But for many fans, the damage is already done. For some, this is the final straw, a breaking point in their relationship with Disney's live-action experiment. For others, it's a messy but fascinating look into the challenges of updating beloved stories in a world that's rapidly changing. Either way, one thing is clear: Snow White was never just a remake. It became a battleground for nostalgia, for artistic vision, for public trust. And now, with everything on the line, the question remains: can Disney still bring fairy tales to life, or has the magic finally worn off? One thing is undeniable: Snow White has become the center of a storm that no one saw coming. From lifelong Disney loyalists to casual moviegoers who barely track Hollywood headlines, everyone's paying attention. And the so-called meltdown, whether it actually happened or not, has become more than a rumor. It's a symbol, a flashpoint, proof of how fast a single story can spiral into a cultural wildfire in today's media landscape. But this isn't just about gossip. It speaks to something much deeper. It's about the fragile balance between creativity and commerce, about the tug-of-war between modern messaging and timeless storytelling. about the growing disconnect between what studios think audiences want and what fans are actually willing to embrace. Whether Rachel Zegler really broke down after a confrontation with Jack Black, or whether it's all just smoke from the internet rumor machine, the story has taken on a life of its own, and it captures something real, the sense that this project, once considered a surefire win, is now a cautionary tale. A tale of how even the most sacred stories can stumble. What happens next? The coming months will tell us everything. If the movie tanks, Disney may finally be forced to rethink its live-action remake playbook. Not abandon it entirely, but maybe slow down, be more intentional, and, most importantly, respect the source material that made audiences fall in love in the first place. But if Snow White defies expectations and manages to succeed despite the chaos, defenders will claim redemption. And the meltdown rumor? It'll become just one more wild footnote in an already turbulent story. Either way, the legacy is sealed. Because Snow White is no longer just a film, it's a cultural case study of fan passion, creative pressure, and the volatile alchemy of modern storytelling. And whether the meltdown was real, exaggerated, or entirely fictional, it represents something true, that even the most iconic fairy tales aren't immune to the weight of modern expectation.